The Aesthetics of Leadership podcast, the look of leadership that is unmistakable. Man, thanks so much for a phone call from around the world, literally. I mean, how many time zones are you away?
A bunch. I think
Yeah,
probably plus 16 hours, something like that from Pacific. So it's definitely a switch up.
yeah, that's pretty incredible. I'm glad there was at least some time that we could match. I think it's the beginning of your day and the start to the end of mine, something like that. So, um, Zach, 30 episodes ago, you came on the show. It's been 2 years, and now you find yourself in Bali. I am curious how Zach Bailey goes from what Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, all the way to Bali. There's a story there, and I'd love to just start there.
Yeah, for sure, man. So I think when we connected 30 episodes ago, that's the time frame we're using. I forget how long ago that actually was, like a couple years, maybe a year, maybe. Yeah, I was in Kelowna, British Columbia. But before that, starting from Winnipeg, Manitoba, that's where I was raised essentially. And then just through execution of my online business, I just started traveling a little bit. I was in Mexico for a little bit, and I was in BC for a little bit, and I was just kind of bouncing around, kind of like digital nomad type of thing, right? And then I was just in Kelowna, British Columbia for a little bit, but I fell in love with the city and decided to move there. And that's where I lived like all of last year. And then I was planning on staying there. However, my brother, who's been living in Bali more often than not over the last 4 years, convinced me to come to Bali. And he gave me a pretty sophisticated sales pitch to come to Bali. And I'm loving it here so far. It's a very cool new experience for me. I'm still pretty much in work mode for the vast majority of the time, but I'm also really enjoying the disconnection here, just like doing local things and just chilling at the pool and just enjoying the weather and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the background that you have behind you there, that is a drastic change to what Canada is experiencing right now. So, I'm pretty confident, Zach, that it wasn't that hard a sales pitch to get you to come to Bali, was it?
No, he didn't need much material to convince me to come.
So, Zach, on our first episode, we talked a lot about your entrepreneurial journey, dropping out of university, going out on your own, trying several different things, and then finding yourself as the owner, operator of your elite coaching business, elite self-coaching business. And I guess it begs the question for me is how your definition of success has changed over the years, particularly now that, from a digital nomad perspective, you're in the top 1% of those able to travel and have the experiences that you're experiencing right now. Success looks different than it did maybe when we talked 2 years ago. I'm curious how it's evolved.
It's a great question, man, and it's a question I've like analyzed with myself recently as well. My definition of success has not evolved in the sense that I'm still so far away from what I consider to be my max potential in life, and just in regards of like finance, in regards of the company I'm going to create, in regards of impacting the world in a positive manner. I've moved forward in these ways, but I'm still like so far off of the North Star. So that hasn't really changed. What has changed is, yeah, my lifestyle has changed a bit, and I've made some progress. One aspect of success that I've honed in on more than anything is the emotional environment, the inner emotional environment. Because if we're not careful, we can make strides and make progress in our external world, but if our internal world goes unchecked, then we sign up for a life of misery, of whatever flavor of misery it is for us. Like for certain people, it's depressive emotions or sadness or loneliness or just feeling discouraged. And we tend to continue to feel those no matter what changes we make in our external. And I was realizing that there were some very kind of vicious emotional patterns that I was experiencing the vast majority of the time. And, I can distract myself with little business wins for 24, 48 hours, but then they would just come right back, and it'd be a very constant and relentless experience of just disempowering emotions. And so now integrated within my definition of success is just joy and peace in the present moment. And because I'm realizing that, I'm going to continue to work hard towards my goals and my ideals in life, but I also need to teach myself to be, enjoy the present moment, to really be present, to feel some bliss, to feel some joy. And because I know that you can't wait for XYZ situation to feel good because there's always going to be another like achievement to have, more this, more that. And so you really need to teach yourself to feel good in the present moment. I'm still an early student in this process. But to your question, what does my definition of success look like now? That's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. And I guess it resonates when you look on social media, the grind culture of young entrepreneurs, that it's always forward looking, and it seems like very little sitting in the present. It is always forward looking and forward thinking, and tomorrow and the next day and 3 months from now and the grind. It's got to be hard to be still. And if you're an early student, what was the tipping point for you that allowed you to go there versus continually be a victim of it?
I think it was just looking at kind of like where I'm at now and be like, hey man, like you really wanted exactly what you have now, like 3 years ago. You know what I mean? But you still don't feel any better than you did 3 years ago. Like, huh? I can project that
Yeah.
out and I'm going to feel the exact same way for my entire life, no matter what I achieve, if I don't make a fundamental shift here. And yeah, social media is a nasty part of it too, because it's easy to can just compare yourself constantly. There's on social media, there's always going to be someone that's smarter than you, sexier than you, richer than you, has a better body than you, better relationship than you, blah, blah, blah. Right. And so you really need to look back on your own wins and your own progress because we're all in our own lane. And instead of letting these, external reference points on social media, some of which are not real and, embellished and faked, but many of which are real. And there's people that are crushing it in many areas of life. But these reference points don't take away from what you're doing in your own lane. If anything, you can teach yourself to let them inspire you to take more action towards your goals in your own lane. And so I just really refocused on who am I versus who am I yesterday versus who was I 5 years ago. And there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be happy about. And if we all took a peek back into our past, we could all find things to feel good about in regards of who we are now versus who we used to be, instead of simply just focusing on who we're not yet. Because if that's or what we haven't achieved yet, because if that's where all of our focus is allocated, then we're signing up to not feel good no matter what we achieve, because there's always going to be more to achieve and more to become.
There's a lot of truth in that. I know we talked on the first episode together a lot about your mindset and your mindset practices, and I'm curious. Uh, your approach combines a lot of health, a lot of mindset, a lot of energy management. What was the journey like in finding the best combination for you? And the second part of that question is, how do you advise others in formulating their secret sauce to success, if you will?
Yeah. I evaluate, I mean, first you got to define what is success for you. And so again, that goes back to the original question, which is like, what is your max potential in life? Like what is not like if your parents asked you, if your friends asked you per se, but like when you're looking at yourself in the mirror at 3 a.m. and no one else is around, like what do you really want to achieve in life? Business, career, how do you want to impact the world? How do you want to make the world a better place? What kind of relationships, experiences, et cetera, do you want to have? When you die and look back on your life, what do you want that story to be? The max potential version of it, right? And then who do you need to become in order to actually make that realistic? Who do you need to become to take a respectable stab at that max potential vision? Because you are going to need to become a certain version of yourself. The current version of you is not going to cut it. And so then the question becomes, what are the specific elements of self-development that I need to embark on in order to actually progress towards that? And that's where energy comes in. It's where routines come in. It's where skill development comes in, mindset, emotional patterns, identity, et cetera, right? There's going to be like 100 different little areas of self-development that one needs to focus on in order to progress towards their max potential. Now, if your energy is lacking, or in many cases, if men that come into our program, their health and fitness isn't there, or their confidence isn't there, or there's one of these big elements, like that is often the highest leverage area of development that you got to embark on to start with, right? It's just essentially closing the delta between who you are now and who you know you need to become. And so again, if one of those pivotal elements are missing, like health, energy, Like you need those in check. You absolutely need those in check. We cannot max out our potential if we die an early death due to health concerns that are within our control. We can't max out our true potential if we're on a 5 out of 10 energy on a daily basis, right? And then so you need to make sure your nutrition's in check and your sleep's in check and your hydration's in check and all these things. And so for me, it's just evaluating how do I operate at the highest possible level on a daily basis. And then again, that involves like nutrition, it involves fitness, it involves like calibrating myself emotionally, it involves feeding my mind mentally. It involves taking massive action towards my goals because that makes me feel good. And just essentially making sure all those nails are hit on a daily basis seems to be the personal success formula for me.
Yeah, and that's personal responsibility I hear in your words. And I would argue that maybe specifically 25 to 45-year olds, uh, I find a lack of responsibility. It's more of a forgetting that they have that response ability to make changes in these domains of life that move the needle forward. Is that something you see as a pattern in that age range, 25 to 45? And if so, is there a root problem that you see consistent throughout those age ranges?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty prevalent in society in general, independent of age. I think that there's a blatant lack of ownership being taken over results in one's life. The average kind of mentality is to just blame externally, like whether it's blaming the economy, or blaming your parents, or blaming an injury, or blaming this, or blaming that. A lot of people have results in their life that they're dissatisfied with, and they're not doing anything about it. And some of this is coming from like learned helplessness. Like they have a belief that they don't have any agency to change. And this could come from a lot of different sources. But what people do need to realize is like it is 100% your responsibility, not 99%, but 100%. And a lot of people have really unfortunate things happen to them in life that make it a bit more challenging, that stack the odds a bit more against them, like being raised in a certain country or with certain parents, or a certain, again, injury, or a certain, whatever the case, right? Where it actually does make it harder. But and it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to turn things around. 100% your responsibility, right? And a lot of people are just kind of dodging that responsibility and making excuses. And you can live a life that way, but you're gonna have a lot of regret at the end of the line when you're on your deathbed at 90, 100 years old, looking back and saying like, wow, I wish I would have done something about it. So yeah, I do see a pattern. And, I think one person at a time, we can start to just reclaim responsibility and start to turn things around.
Yeah, that is so good. So many things I appreciate with what you just said. Two of them before I forget because I'm older. The two ideas that you spoke to was maximum potential. That feels to me like a visioneering process, like you're creating in your mind the vision of the person you want to become. You're always becoming, right? And you're being pulled toward that vision because it's bigger than you. Do you feel like people aren't thinking that big? That again, I think you mentioned the word that the average mentality. It takes in becoming something greater than what you are right now. That's got to be big. That's heavy. It's above average. Are people just not going there?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are not thinking nearly as big as what their true potential is as a human being. Now, everyone has a different idea of what their max potential is, and everyone's, wired a bit differently and is called to achieve different things. And I think a lot of people are blatantly ignoring what their calling is and what their true potential is. I think a lot of people have this little spark inside them that says, like, look, you can become this version of yourself. You can achieve this. You can do that. You can impact the world in this way. And they're just ignoring it, they're suppressing it, or they're too scared to go for it. All of which are valid emotions. I mean, it's not an easy process to relentlessly pursue your max potential. But it's also not easy to stay average. I mean, both are hard. Like if you stay as this ordinary version of yourself that doesn't really go for it, it's easy because you don't have to cross over your comfort zone as much. You don't have to develop yourself and face fears and all these things. But you also have to face the regret of not doing it. And that's pretty fucking hard. Alternatively, if you do progress towards your max potential, you're going to be facing fears. You're going to be facing edges all day long. You're going to be pushing yourself out of your comfort zone more times than you can even count. And it's an incredibly gut-wrenching process oftentimes. So both are hard. But I think the vast majority of people are in fact thinking small. They're kind of shooting themselves in the foot before they can even get going. Again, this isn't their fault. Like society conditions us a certain way, and it makes it more enticing to play it safe. More often than not, the people around us are going to shoot down our massive thinking, especially people that come from like a conventional childhood and were raised a certain way, like our parents, etc., or whoever the case, even a lot of our friends. And so we have to, if you are going to think big, you're signing up for facing potentially a lot of judgment from those around you. And oftentimes you're going to be a team of one, thinking a certain way, holding certain standards for yourself. And it's hard, which is why it's important to find your tribe, to find people that are also thinking massive and surround yourself with those people, because then it's way, you feel like you're swimming with the current as opposed to against the current then. And so if I had to give one piece of advice for someone who knows they can become so much more and achieve so much more, it's one, define that for yourself, but two, start to separate yourself from people that don't think the same way and surround yourself with people who do, because it'll be a whole lot easier for you.
Absolute gold in those words. I have another set of gold on my whiteboard over here, and it says, "Who you are becoming is more important than who you've been." Does that statement resonate with you?
Yeah, because it highlights the truth that we have no obligation to be the same person we were 5 minutes ago, is another way to phrase that I love. And a lot of people are just so trapped in their current identity and the person that they've been for their whole life, right? Like, oh, I'm just this type of person. Oh, I'm just a lazy type of person. Oh, I'm not a morning person. I can't get up. Or I'm just not the type of person that can focus. Or I'm not the type of person that can do that. And they handcuff themselves to limiting aspects of their identity when in fact you could define a new, exciting, high performance version of yourself and say, like, what would that version of myself do right now? Well, he'd put down the phone and go get to work. You know, he would stop watching porn and he would go do this. He would put down this junk food and go do that. He would go do deep work on this. He would send this email and he would do work for the next 45 minutes straight without looking at your phone, blah, blah, blah. You could just adopt new behaviors and a new identity at the snap of a finger. And a lot of people, again, don't realize they have this agency to change. And if you do that, if you radically become a new version of yourself, you're going to find that your old patterns are going to want to seep back in. Your old thought patterns are going to seep back in. You're going to want to go back into your old habits, etc. And you have to continually train yourself through your behavior to step up into this new version of yourself. At the start, it's going to become unnatural. Eventually, it'll become normal. It'll become who you are. But a lot of people never even take that first step to change because they don't realize that they can.
So good. I appreciate how you use the word agency. That is a really great word for ownership, and I respect that word. The other word I respect when it comes to you, Zach, is authenticity. You have always been an affable young man with a brilliant mind and an amazing way of orchestrating and engineering your present and your future, regardless of your past. I'm curious when you scale your online presence and your online business the way you have, how have you held on to authenticity so well? Because it shines really brightly and it's incredibly respectful the way you do that.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, man. I appreciate the kind words. Honestly, I think my authenticity has increased over time. It's not even necessarily been a process of holding on to it. It's been a process of like learning how to be it. I remember when I first started, like, for example, my Instagram account and started, portraying myself as a public figure and making content and things of this nature. Like even up until recent years, I felt like I was in a box. I felt like I had to kind of say certain things that people wanted to hear and show up a certain way and all these things. And over the last year or two, I've kind of really started to step into like, what do I want to post? What do I want to say? How do I want to show up? Right? Because at the end of the day, that's really what matters. Like the one thing the marketplace and social media in general is starving of right now is authenticity. People just showing up as the version of as who they are instead of trying to like flex or trying to be this or be that or be perfect or like say the right thing. Like there's so much of that. And so now it's been a very conscious process for me where I literally ask myself the question, like, what do I want to post here? Like, if I have hesitancy of posting this, like, why would that be? Oh, it's just because of like this random like fear of this random person that I don't even talk to seeing it and blah blah blah. And like, why would that stop me from doing anything? Let me post it. Just kind of walking myself through this process, holding my own hand along the process of becoming, more authentic. And I'm still a student of this as well. Just focusing on being me, being fully me without any reservation. And so I really do think it's been an intentional practice over the last year or two to answer your question.
Yeah, your authenticity comes across as, man, you remain a student of the process, regardless of your scale, and that is an incredibly inspiring and respectful trait. So kudos to you, man, because sometimes that gets lost in scale. So mad respect there. I think anybody who sees you online, Zach, would see clearly the metric of success in your physical transformation. What's the metric for success in the other aspects of Zach, the spiritual, the mental, the emotional? Do you have a metric that you're kind of keeping an eye on there?
It's a super fascinating question, man. And it's a question that I think is worth looking at because it's something so intangible, right? Like fitness, there's easy metrics to put there. There's body fat percentage, there's size, strength, mobility, etc. All of these things you can easily measure. When we're talking about mental, emotional, spiritual, it's a less easy to put like a tangible metric on it, but it's still important to measure. It's still important to improve. And I would say I have some pretty vague metrics, but it's something that I've started to focus more on. For example, emotionally, I spent the vast majority of the last years in a very low emotional place, like 99% of the time. And I started to just think to myself, like, wow, it's like I'm spending probably 90% plus time in this disempowering emotional states. And so some metrics or areas of improvement I started to look at myself were like, one, how quickly can I get myself out of it? Right. And then we look into methods of like changing my physiology, changing my focus, changing the stories I'm telling myself. And at first, it'd be impossible to rip myself out of that disempowering emotional state. But as I built skill over time, now if I'm in down in the dumps, I can get myself out within half a day or a day, and sometimes within hours, sometimes within an hour. If I take drastic enough action, depending on the context of the low emotional state. So one, like, how quickly can I improve my emotional state? This is a skill. On the spirituality context, what I've developed spiritually, the main improvement I would articulate in that department is just developing faith and developing a trust that I'm being guided. I personally I call it the universe. You can call it God, love, life, whatever floats your boat. I've had a conscious like belief that I'm being guided and there's something there, but not like a conviction. You know what I mean? Where I would see certain signs or whatever, but I'd be like, nah, like that's whatever. Like that's nothing. It's just coincidence, right? But now I'm like, and now I'm fully just surrendering. Not, I'm still again a student in this process too, but I'm working on surrendering and just deploying faith and just trust in the universe. And and so that's been an area of improvement to me too, where my trust was at a 3 out of 10. Now it's at a 9 out of 10. You know what I mean? I'm still working
Yeah.
there. So that's an area too. And I think that all in all, like mentally too, you can look at different things like focus. How long am I able to focus without getting distracted? And I guess what I'm figuring out as I'm talking out loud here is a lot of these just like are surrounding how do you want to think? How do you want to feel? How are you thinking and feeling now? And then how can you start to train yourself out of that? Catch yourself in disempowering patterns and switch to more empowering alternatives. And then how long does it take you to switch? How long can you stay in these new empowering alternatives? How long can you feel good? What can you do to make yourself feel good and start to build that skill? And it's not as tangible of a metric as like losing 10 pounds. But I think if you can at least put some vague metrics on it and just kind of vaguely label these areas of improvement you want to make, it's enough to start making improvements in those areas.
Yeah, the big word there is surrender. Zach. I think that is something we fight as men, as young warriors like you, probably more than anything else, is the giving up of control. And I think when you surrender to the higher power, the universe, whatever your taste is, there is a lesson in there that to me speaks to what we've touched on, I believe, in the first interview and some here is your energy management. When you surrender, you're not expending so much energy on control of the situation you're not in control of. You have more to put into energy for authenticity, energy to shine your light, energy in your connections and your environment. Curious how energy management for you has evolved just 30 episodes ago when we first talked, because I see you doing your breath work in the morning. I see you prime your day. That is that is a great energy management process. But when it comes to surrender, has it changed any as you've gotten better at surrendering?
Yeah, I think in regards of energy management, just in general, my approach has been attacking it from all the kind of main angles. One, like biological side, sleep, water, nutrition, fitness, like those are big components of energy. Like all these emotional and spiritual forms of energy, they're much harder to cultivate if your body is not firing in full cylinders. And so just making sure that the bases are checked there. Like, are you sleeping well? Are you getting enough rest? Like, are you drinking enough water? Eating food that actually fuels you, that gives you energy instead of takes away energy? Are you fit and healthy, etc.? And so just making sure those boxes are checked. And then the surrender for me has a lot has came into on the emotional side of things. And so just feeling a sense of just like, whew, just like kind of getting out of the fight or flight and just relaxing into the present moment. Oftentimes, I found myself caught in patterns of just thinking into the future, focusing on what I don't have yet. It creates stress responses in my body. I'd be comparing myself to others, and it's just such an uptight energy. And so, part of the surrender for me has been saying like, whew, just chill out a second. Like, let's focus on what we've done so far. Let's focus on where we're going, which is exciting. Let's focus on what we can do today, and then surrender in the sense of just having faith. Say like, I'm on pace. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm in my own lane, and I can enjoy the present moment. And that's really where the surrenders come in, and that produces better energy because now you're no longer focused on what you haven't achieved yet or who you aren't yet, which makes you feel like crap. You're focused just on the present moment. You bring all your energy back into the present moment, and that gives you more energy to execute and to create. And so again, that's still suited in this, but it's been a practice of mine, and that's really one of the primary ways my energy management has changed.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant words. Also brilliant is that view behind you. You've left the winter of Canada and you're now in a beautiful environment. Curious how you're going to parlay the gift of being in such a beautiful place, how you're going to use the landscape in your energy management and surrender processes.
Yeah, I mean, part of my intention coming here was to expand myself emotionally and spiritually. Um, One thing I've realized is that it's not necessary, but it is a nice catalyst to change your environment in your self-development journey. I think that it's optimal to not be in the same exact place for your entire journey. This is just what I've found personally. Like when you're looking at the same walls, the same people, the same streets, it's easy to kind of stay stuck to those emotional associations and who you've been. So if you just wipe the slate clean, create a completely new environment for yourself, it's often a nice opportunity to just create a fresh start within your self-development as well, create some new habits, some new focuses, etc. And so that's part of my intention coming here. Bali in particular is quite oriented to the emotional, spiritual, entrepreneurial vibe. And specifically in the city that we're in, it's like the healing hub of Bali. Like there's very chill here, very grounded energy, a lot of people doing spiritual work and etc. And I noticed that even just being here, especially in certain locations, the energy is just so grounded. It's so peaceful, and that emanates into you. And I've felt just a reduction of charge in a good way when I'm in these certain places, just feeling more connected to the earth, more peaceful, more the waters are calmer on the inside when I'm in these certain places. And so, and even just being in this place compared to like an apartment in Canada, for example, it has like a more peaceful baseline to it. And so I found that as a nice additive to my self-development journey. It definitely feels a lot more peaceful. And it needs a lot of inner work in conjunction with that in my case, like very intentional meditations, etc. But just being in this environment I found is a nice catalyst for that.
Yeah, I meant to mention this earlier, Zach, but I can tell just the little while that you've been over there. There's a change in your demeanor from 30 episodes ago. And I know a lot has happened over 30 episodes, but I know you've been in Bali for just a short period of time, but your energy is peaceful. So I see you in that regard. Um, Zach, another great conversation. I really want to be respectful of your time because I know you've got places to go and people to take care of. Zach, you have such an incredible holistic approach to helping people transform and in body, mind, and spirit. If something resonated with the listeners today and they want to communicate with you, what's the best way for people to reach out to Zach Bailey?
Yeah, I would say my personal Instagram at ZACHRBAILEY.
Excellent. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Zach, again, thank you for your time, brother. You are one of the most incredible lights of leadership out there in the space. You were somebody that I appreciate being in the circle, able to communicate with you, able to have you on the show, able to share perspectives. Your light shines bright, brother, and thank you for that. It's much appreciated and madly respected.
Thank you so much, brother. Likewise, man, I see you as well. I see the light that you're spreading and your positive energy every single time we hop on and just in your social media in general, man. So appreciate the light that you're spreading. Love your questions. Love these interviews, man. Happy to talk with you anytime. And I'm glad that I can provide some value to your audience.
The Aesthetics of Leadership podcast, the look of leadership that is unmistakable.